Welcome once again, my fellow manipulators of digital fate. I'm Richie, this is Capricorn, and today we're back at it with another spoiler season video for Magic the Gathering's Final Fantasy expansion. We don't have as many cards to go over today. I actually just found out today that they're dragging out spoiler season for like 3 weeks, so that's why they've been giving us less cards per day, which up until this video, I've been doing 2 days worth of cards in each video. But I think I'm going to start doing each day's worth of cards in a single video that's a little bit smaller, even if it is a little bit smaller, so I can get these cards out to you as quick as possible while they're super fresh, while they're still on everybody's mind, and when we're excited to talk about them. So we're going to dive right in. Before we do, please like the video. It helps me get it out to so many more people and helps the channel grow. And also subscribe if you're new so you never miss an upload, because I have a ton of content on the way. We've got some pretty crazy cards to go over today. In fact, one of the cards spoiled today might be the best card in the set. Maybe the best is the wrong way to put it. The most powerful card in the set. I can see some ways to abuse the hell out of it, but we'll get there in a moment. First of all, we're going to start off with Instant Ramen. This is an artifact food with flash for 2 colorless mana, and when it enters you draw a card, and you can pay 2 mana, tap it, and sacrifice it to gain 3 life. Nothing super crazy here, although it is worth noting that you could flicker this to draw additional cards potentially in the right deck. It having flash is kind of interesting. I'm wondering if that's maybe so you can flash it in and sacrifice it to things that allow you to sacrifice artifacts, or if maybe you can just like trick your opponent into alpha striking you when they don't think you can gain life, flash this in and use it in the same turn, and then you're still alive and you crack back for the win. I'm really not certain what the relevancy of flash to this card is, and I'm hoping it actually does end up relevant within some sort of archetype in limited for this set, because I think it could be really fun. But next up, we've got Suplex. This is another card that we got leaked a few weeks before spoiler season officially started, but now we have the actual version of this card, the official version of this card to go over. This is 1 red and 1 for a sorcery, and you choose one. Suplex deals 3 damage to target creature. If that creature would die this turn, you exile it instead, or you exile target artifact. So this is basically a braid. The big difference being it's sorcery speed instead of instant, but for not having the ability to hold it up and have that instant speed interaction, you get the trade-off of being able to exile whatever you take out with it, which honestly in some situations is going to be better, especially in limited, I think. That being said, losing the ability to play this at instant speed like you could a braid is a pretty huge downside. I think more often than not the instant speed is going to matter more than the exile, but there will definitely be circumstances where the exile is super relevant, and that makes me think that it's possible this card sees play in sideboards in Constructed, in Standard and whatnot. I'm not entirely sure if that's going to be the case, but it's possible for sure. Next up, we've got Poison the Waters, a sorcery for 1 black and 1, and you choose one. All creatures get -1/-1 until end of turn, or target player reveals their hand, you choose an artifact or creature card from it, and that player discards that card. I actually like this card a lot. The fact that it can just wipe out all of the hero tokens that seem to be a very prominent part of the mechanics within this set, at least in limited, kind of seems good. And there are going to be plenty of 1 toughness creatures this can hit as well. I do wish it was instant speed. If it was instant speed, the -1/-1 would matter a lot more in combat, where you could line up blocks or attacks or whatnot, and then kill stuff that wouldn't otherwise die. You know, it's a way to make that -1/-1 more impactful when you can use it as a surprise. At sorcery speed, not the greatest, right? You're not going to be able to protect yourself from extra damage with it by, you know, casting it when your opponent's attacking. You're really only going to be able to nerf your opponent's blockers or kill stuff with 1 toughness. That being said, having the alternate mode of being able to make them discard something from their hand is not nothing, and I think maybe having like the -1/-1 part of this card as an alternate way to use the card kind of justifies this being a 2 mana discard spell rather than a 1. I think the versatility of being able to hit their hand or hit the board in some capacity does kind of make this interesting. I'm not really entirely certain how good it is until we play with it. But at the very least, there is potential with this one just because the two different modes are so different and both can impact in such huge ways if they're used appropriately. But next up, we've got Quistus Tre, a 2/2 legendary human wizard for 1 blue and 2. She's from Final Fantasy VIII. She was fun. She used a whip. She has the blue magic ability, so when Quistus Tre enters, you may cast target instant or sorcery card from a graveyard, and mana of any type can be spent to cast that spell. If that spell would be put into a graveyard, exile it instead. So she's sort of like a Snapcaster Mage. You do have to spend 3 mana and then still pay for the thing that you're casting from your graveyard. But in Limited, being able to reuse your best instant or sorcery from the yard without really having to jump through any hoops, you just need the mana, kinda seems good. The only real downside is you do want to hold this in your hand until you get a chance to actually use it on a good target. So sometimes you might be in a situation where you just need to drop a 3-drop creature, and maybe you have to drop Quistus because you don't have anything else to play, when really you want to hold on to Quistus to replay like a removal spell or something. I'm sure that situation will come up in Limited. If that's the worst case scenario, though, you could do a lot worse. I think still holding this in your hand and waiting for the right removal spell or card draw spell or whatnot to replay from your graveyard is probably more often than not going to be the right play. And again, I'm not entirely sure this is good enough to make the cut in Standard, but it does have the potential. In the right deck where you can get the right kind of value off replaying things from your yard, it is possible. Another thing that I want to point out about this card that could make it valuable is the fact that the ability triggers on entering, not on being cast. So if you return Quistus from the graveyard with something like Helping Hand for only 1 mana and it enters tapped, being able to then recast something from your graveyard, possibly that same Helping Hand for just 1 mana, could be kind of cool, or maybe something even better. So there are some interesting ways to use this. You could also flicker Quistus to get that ability to trigger again and get to recast something from your graveyard. Maybe the flicker spell you used. There's definitely potential for this card, and it'll be interesting to see if it actually ends up being good enough to make the cut. But next up, we've got Phantom Train. I'm actually loving this one. This one's a 4/4 artifact vehicle with trample for 1 black and 3, and you can sacrifice another artifact or creature to put a +1/+1 counter on this vehicle, and it becomes a spirit artifact creature in addition to its other types until end of turn. The most notable thing about this card is the fact that you can't actually crew it with people, which is kind of perfect for the Phantom Train, right? Because it's a ghost train, so the fact that it doesn't have a crew cost is amazing. The fact that the only way to get it going is to exile something from the graveyard, aka the dead, is just flavorfully perfect. But I think the one thing that's super important about this card that's probably easy to overlook is that it's a free sack outlet that you can use as many times as you want. Now granted, you're not going to get the extra value of turning this into a creature with each additional sacrifice during the same turn, but you will still get an extra counter, and more importantly, it's just a way to sacrifice things and get those sacrifice triggers that you want in your deck without spending any mana whatsoever. And that makes me think that it's possible this card actually sees play in Standard in a sacrifice or aristocrat style deck. We already saw Sephiroth being the absolute best card like aristocrats and sacrifice decks could ever hope to get, and there are going to be a ton of decks built around that card as soon as this set's legal. For sure, you can count on that, but having a free sacrifice outlet in mono black could be super important. We do have things like Bartolome, but that requires you to go into Orzhov, and if you want to try to build a sacrifice deck that's like Rakdos Sack or mono black Sack or something like that, and you don't want to use white, then this could be another way to get free unlimited sacrifice outlets for that deck. And that deck's going to be way more powerful than it otherwise would have been now that we have Sephiroth. So I do think a card like this does have a chance of being usable in something like that in Standard. It is 4 mana, it is a lot, but I still think the potential's there. I don't know if at the end of the day it's going to make the cut. It really depends on how many other sacrifice outlets we have and what the quality of those sacrifice outlets are. But the potential's definitely there, and I'm going to try brewing it for sure and messing around and experimenting with this card. At the very least, in Limited, this thing is going to be super, super important to the Aristocrat style, Sacrifice style decks in Limited, because that's definitely going to be a Limited archetype. So if you do end up playing in that archetype, you're going to want to pick up this as soon as you see it, because I do think it's going to be a super high pick in Limited, specifically because it's just a free automatic sack enabler in all of those decks within Limited. And I think there's actually going to be more than one sacrifice archetype, depending on your color pairing, in Limited that you can draft into. So it's possible you might have to compete with another sacrifice deck across the table. So definitely snatch these up whenever you see them if that's the deck you're going into. But next up, we've got Summon Primal Garuda. I think this is the last uncommon. It might not be. This is a 3/3 flying enchantment creature Saga Harpy for 1 white and 3. And on Chapter 1, it has Aerial Blast, so this creature deals 4 damage to target tapped creature an opponent controls. I'm absolutely loving these summons, the fact that they're Saga creatures. So for 4 mana, you get a 3/3 flying blocker and 4 damage, killing one of their beefy creatures that's tapped in the same card. I already love it. And then we get Chapter 2 and 3 where she performs Slipstream, which makes it so another target creature you control gets +1/+0 and flying until end of turn. So it comes down as a 3/3 blocker in the air, nukes something with 4 toughness or less that's tapped, and then on Chapter 2 you can swing as a 3/3 flyer, and another creature gets +1/+0 and flying and swings in, so you get some alpha strike potential there. And then on Chapter 3 it does go away, but something is still going to get +1/+0 and flying and maybe be able to swing in and close out the game for you. I think in Limited this card is just super, super awesome. It's probably just barely not good enough for Constructed. If it was 3 mana, I think it would be absolutely bonkers in Standard and make the cut. But at 4 mana, I think it's going to be just a little bit too slow, even though it does get lasting value. But in Limited, this card's going to be bananas. And just in general, I'm loving the flavor and the mechanics of these summons. I think this card is a great example of that. It's just super sweet. Next up, I lied to you. We do have another uncommon. This is Summon Anima. Another summon, a 4/4 Menace Enchantment Creature Saga Horror for 2 black and 4. On Chapters 1, 2, and 3, you have the Pain ability, so you draw a card and lose a life, which is already kind of nuts, right? This is what, 4/1 card advantage on an uncommon? I mean, granted, it is pretty expensive at 6 mana, but that's still pretty good for Limited, right? And then on Chapter 4, she casts Oblivion, or he casts Oblivion. Is Anima a girl or a guy? I guess it's an it. It casts Oblivion. Each opponent sacrifices a creature of their choice and loses 3 life. And it's opponent, not player, so you don't have to do it. This card is just amazing. This is like 5-for-1 value. 4/4 Menace swinging in every turn. That's hard to block. Even just drawing 3 cards and losing 3 life over the course of 3 turns is pretty gnarly. And then eventually they have to sack a creature, and it helps you close out the game by making them lose 3 life. Everything about this card is awesome, I guess, except for the cost, right? 6 mana is a bit much, but I think if it was any cheaper, it would have to be a rare. At 5 mana, this card would be absolutely insane. A 4/4 Menace for 5 that draws you 3 cards, makes your opponent sack a creature, and makes them lose 3 life. Another thing that's worth noting too is the fact that they lose 3 life on Chapter 4 kind of makes up for the fact that you lose 3 life over the courses of Chapter 1, 2, and 3 when you're drawing those cards. 1 life each turn, eventually you've lost 3 life, and then when Chapter 4 triggers, they have as well. So I think that's pretty interesting as well, because it means that you're not necessarily losing the race. You fall behind a little bit in the beginning, and you make that up in the end. It is worth noting, though, you do have to keep the summon alive. Since it is a creature, your opponent can kill it. But I mean, if you're drawing cards off of this and maybe blocking stuff or getting through for damage, and then eventually they use a removal spell and remove it, you also got rid of their removal spell with a card that drew you cards and put in some work, and all of that is still really, really good. So even if they kill it, I still feel like it's good. Granted, at the cost, still probably only good enough in Limited, but this one at least has a chance to be relevant in Standard, especially after rotation. The only thing really holding it back is the cost. But next up, we have our first rare of the day. This is Saz Katzroy, a 3/3 legendary human pilot for 1 green and 3. This dude's from Final Fantasy 13. He's pretty cool. He loves chocobos. He's got a little baby chocobo, I guess, which makes sense with his abilities. When 𝐴 𝑇ℎ𝑒𝑟𝑟𝑎𝑛 enters, you may search your library for a bird or basic land card, reveal it, put it into your hand, and then shuffle. Whenever 𝐴 attacks, you put a +1/+1 counter on target creature and then double the number of +1/+1 counters on that creature. So it's already pretty nuts. Just the floor being a 4-mana 3/3 that fetches your best chocobo, and we've already seen that chocobo tribal is going to be insanely pushed in this set and a very real thing. So the fact that you can tutor up your best chocobo, or maybe divert to like a certain specific chocobo you need in a certain specific instance because of the way that the game's going, is pretty nuts. Even if they kill 𝐴, like, you still got your best card and forced them to have to spend a thing to kill him, or, blocked and traded with the creature, or whatever the case may be. So all in all, that's really good. The fact that it has an alternate mode, if you're in a pinch, you can find a basic land to fix your colors, just makes it that much better as kind of like extra gravy. And then the fact that if they don't deal with him after you play him, he can just keep buffing up your dudes with counters every single turn, seems kind of insane, especially when you consider most of the chocobo synergies that we've seen so far involve counters in some way. So 𝐴 just takes that concept and ramps it up to 11 and exponentially increases the amount of counters that you're getting on your creatures. All of that just seems awesome. I think he's going to be a very important piece in the chocobo standard deck, which will absolutely be a standard deck, you better believe it. But I'm interested to see if maybe this card is still worth running in a deck that's even maybe not a chocobo deck. Maybe it just happens to have a really good bird that you can find, or maybe it's a ramp deck, or maybe it's just in a +1/+1 counters matters deck for that ability, and you just happen to have one bird in there that's really, really good, that's worth playing regardless of chocobo tribal, and you can still fetch that and get value off of this. It'll be interesting to see just how many different decks this ends up being relevant in. I'm excited. I know chocobo tribal is going to be nuts. Pretty cool seeing a card this good for 𝐴. But next up we have Machinists Arsenal. This is an artifact equipment for 1 white and 4. It has the job select ability, so it will make a 1/1 colorless hero creature token when it enters, and you'll get to attach this equipment for free. If you want to attach it to something else, you can later use the Machina ability and equip it for 4 colorless mana. The equipped creature gets +2/+2 for each artifact you control, and is an artificer in addition to its other types. I absolutely love this card. I think most people are going to look at this and think that it costs a little too much, and maybe it's not worth it. But the fact that the creature gets a double Anthem hit for every artifact, it's not just +1/+1 for each artifact, it's +2/+2, seems kind of bananas to me. We've already seen Simulacrum Synthesizer decks being absolutely nuts in standard right now. I could see this being a very easy inclusion. Triggers your synthesizer, makes another creature that's absolutely huge in any kind of go wide artifact deck, and even if they kill that creature, you can just attach this to whatever you want and keep it coming back for more. Granted, equip 4 is a lot, but if you eventually run out of gas, there's a lot worse things you could do with your mana than just turn one of your creatures into an absolute game-ending threat that your opponent has to stop. And if they just keep killing the creature, you just keep equipping it to something else. It gets even better if you put it on an invasive creature with flying or trample. So there could be some really interesting ways to brew around this card because of that. It reminds me a little bit of the Slick Shot Show-Off. And granted, it's not as fast and explosive as that, but it has lasting value that's going to stick around for pretty much ever. That's really, really hard to deal with. So I feel like in the right deck that goes wide with artifacts and has a lot of evasion, this is just like an auto include. But even if you're not building around it in that way, just a synthesizer deck could make use of this in to an insane capacity. It might be a little bit win more in that deck, so maybe we'll have to experiment with it and try it out. But there is no way that a deck doesn't spring up that this is useful in. +2/+2 for each artifact is just nuts. And the fact that you don't lose that ability if they kill the creature, you can just keep it around and put it on something else is also nuts. And the last thing I want to point out that's easy to overlook about this card is the fact that there's so much equipment synergy coming in this set that every equipment's going to be way, way better than it looks on the surface, because we're used to evaluating equipment in the current state of standard, in the ways that it's currently usable or abusable. But there are so many different new synergies coming for equipment that just being the equipment type is going to make it way, way better than it otherwise would be if it wasn't an equipment. So that's worth taking into account, you know, ways that we can cheat these out easier, ways that we can equip them easier, ways that we can get extra value on things that equipped. All that stuff is coming in this set, which makes this way, way better than it's first going to appear to most people that just kind of judge this in a vacuum, which is how I feel like most content creators tend to evaluate cards when they're looking at sets. That's actually kind of one of my pet peeves. I'm sorry to go off on a tangent, but a lot of other content creators I see out there, when they're evaluating new cards and new sets, they evaluate them in comparison to what they already know in Magic, what it's slotting into, without taking into account everything else that's coming in the same set, new synergies that are coming in the same set, and the actual potential of the card when it's used in the ways it's obviously going to be meant to be used. Didn't mean to go off on a tangent there, but I feel like a lot of content creators overlook a lot of that, and I see a lot of times cards get evaluated as being bad when in reality they're really, really good because of synergies within the set that are just not taken into account, or obvious synergies that seem like they're coming down the line that haven't been spoiled yet, but it's pretty obvious they will be, but you know, they're getting evaluated early without those ideas in mind. So I do like to keep an open mind and consider all of our options, and I do think a card like this is going to be really, really good because of that. But next up, we've got Sarah Farron, a 2/2 legendary human citizen for 3 mana in the colors of Selesnya. The first legendary creature spell you cast each turn costs 2 less to cast. Legendary Tribal is going to be a thing. That already seems kind of awesome. She has another ability. At the beginning of combat on your turn, if you control 2 or more other legendary creatures, you may transform Sarah Farron. We've already seen the Aerith Gainsborough card, Care About Legends. When she dies, you can take her counters and put them on every single legendary creature, which is already nuts. It's not distributing them among legendaries. Every single legendary gets the full amount of counters she died with, which is crazy. And now we see even more legendary support. There's definitely going to be a legendary deck in Standard after this set drops. It might be Human Tribal as well. But anyway, if you do have 2 or more other legendary creatures and you transform Sarah at the beginning of combat, she turns into Crystallized Sarah, which works perfectly with the flavor of the story for Final Fantasy XIII. The first legendary creature spell you cast each turn still costs 2 less, so you do not lose access to that ability, which is huge. No matter what, as long as Sarah's out, you have that 2 cost reduction for the rest of the game. But what she does do is buff up all of your legendary creatures by +2/+2. She becomes a double anthem for legendary creatures, while still giving you access to the cost reduction, and most importantly, becoming a legendary artifact, so that you could theoretically play a new copy of Sarah. It's harder to kill Crystallized Sarah because you can't use creature removal to get rid of her anymore, and the second copy of Sarah can now come down as a creature. You can have the original Sarah and the Crystallized Sarah out and have all of your legendary creature spells get a cost reduction of 4. That seems crazy to me. I just love these legendary cards that flip, specifically because it's so much easier to run 4 copies. Because if you transform it, you can play a fresh copy, you know, on the front side, a second copy, so you don't have to worry as much about having dead cards in your hand that you can't cast. And this card just encapsulates that perfectly by giving you even more synergies when you flip it and then play a new copy. I love this. I'm super excited about trying to brew Legendary Tribal. As soon as this set drops, it's going to be nuts. I think there's going to be multiple versions that will be relevant. Maybe Human Tribal, maybe one that's just kind of everything. We're going to have to wait and see. But this gives me a ton of hope that archetype is going to be super relevant in Standard, and I am so here for it. But that brings us to the last card of today, and it is a doozy, guys. This is Summon Knights of Round. I'm kind of bummed out they couldn't couldn't fit summon Knights of the Round in the name, because it's just such an iconic name. That's what it's always been called, Knights of the Round. But I guess it's fine, summon Knights of Round. Technically, it's not replacing the name of the materia, right? It's just telling you what you're summoning. Oh, Knights of Round. Sure, I'll take it. A 3/3 indestructible enchantment creature saga knight for 2 white and 6. That's an awful lot of mana. Before we even get into the abilities, I just want to point out that this is stupid expensive, and I think a lot of people are going to see how costly this card is and be like, this card's never going to see play. The game's going to be over, especially in a deck where you care about having your own creatures, right? But I want to point out the fact that this is a creature, guys. That means you can use any kind of creature reanimation to bring this from the graveyard into play, and normally you wouldn't be able to do that with sagas. So it's going to be way easier to cheat these cards into play than it normally would be for just like an 8 mana saga like this. And I think it's really, really important to keep that in mind. But we'll get back to that after we talk about the abilities. So it's a 3/3 indestructible, it's 8 mana. On chapter 1, you create 3 2/2 white knight creature tokens. So you immediately have a 3/3 indestructible and 3 2/2s. But then on chapter 2, you get 3 more. And then on chapter 3, you get 3 more. And then in chapter 4, you get 3 more. You have 13 knights out. 12 of them being 2/2s, and 1 of them being a 3/3 indestructible, which makes sense because the end-all be-all knight that comes out at the end is so much bigger, and he's the one that initiates the final attack when you summon him when you summon this in Final Fantasy VII. So flavorfully, that is all amazing. And then on chapter 5, he actually casts Ultimate End, where other creatures you control get +2/+2 until end of turn, and you put an indestructible counter on each of them. Even if you only have the knights, that's a bunch of 4/4 indestructible creatures swinging in, and that seems kind of insane to me. But you're going to use this in decks that probably have a bunch of other creatures. All those other creatures are going to get the buff as well, and more importantly, they're all going to get indestructible counters as well. I can't see you possibly losing if you get to chapter 5 on this card. And what I like most about it is this seems the closest we've got in recent memory to a standard card that's going to be competitive in standard. This will definitely be competitive in standard, that functions like a traditional finisher for control. We've seen a lot of different ways that control tries to get to a finish, but we haven't had like the traditional, like, here's our finisher after we gain control of the board and we do all the things and everything's safe, let's slam the thing and just ride it to victory. And this is like so that more than anything else we've gotten in the last like 5 years. And I'm actually really excited about it. I think a control deck could do a lot worse than to just drag the game out forever, nuke everything you're doing, stop everything you're doing, and eventually drop Knights of the Round and just let it slowly eke out so much value over 5 turns and then Alpha Strike for the win. It just seems nuts to me. I love everything about it. You could even play this and then the next turn play a sweeper and you don't lose the saga creature, right? You're gonna lose whatever knights you've made up until that point, but you won't lose the saga itself because it has indestructible. So you can sweep and then swing in for 3. And then next turn start making more knights again. There's just so many cool ways to use this. And again, going back to the fact that we were already talking about the fact that it's a creature, and so it's going to be easier to cheat into play, that also means you can do things like flicker it, which they made most of the flicker cards that are standard legal over the last however many years. Ever since sagas were created in the original Dominaria set, they've started shifting away from flicker effects that can target enchantments, specifically because flickering sagas is super broken. So if you noticed, all of the flicker effects, with the exception of some that are a little overcosted every now and then, the vast majority of flicker effects are all things that can only target artifacts and creatures now and not enchantments, because flickering sagas was just too powerful. But now that these sagas are creatures, that means you can use all those flicker effects to reset your lore counters to get even more value out of your sagas, and that's something you can do with this as well. There's just so much insane value just built up on this, and I think it's nuts. There's no way this doesn't find a home in some standard deck that's just absolutely mind-bogglingly insane. And I'm absolutely going to do it. I'm going to brew a deck around this. I'm going to make it work. I'm going to find a way to make it work. And I think it's going to be super fun. And I can't wait. But that does it for today, guys. Thank you so much for checking out the video. Not a whole lot of cards today, but we've realized that since they're doing this spoiler season for 3 weeks, there aren't going to be a whole lot of cards each day. So some days I might do just a smaller video like this where we cover everything to get things out to you quicker. Other days, if it's a really small amount, I might wait and still do like a day 2 and 3 kind of thing, like 2 days in one video. So we're going to wing it and see how it goes. But honestly, this set's looking pretty crazy. I do still have videos on the way detailing all of the commander cards coming in a separate video, detailing all of the new Through the Ages bonus sheet cards that are getting a Final Fantasy coat of paint on cards that already exist. That's going to be a separate video. And then I also have all of the rares coming in the starter kit. That's going to come as a separate video as well. Wanted to do all that stuff separately so that these normal daily spoiler videos could just focus on the meat and potatoes of everything that's available in the standard set that you'll open in packs that you can play in standard and play in limited. And man, I'm just super excited about this set, but there's so much more on the way. So please subscribe if you haven't already. Hit that like button because it helps me so much more than you could possibly ever realize. It helps the channel grow and I appreciate it so much. And I'll see you next time. Thanks so much for checking out my channel. I'd like to give a huge shout out to all of my patrons over at Patreon. Without you guys, this channel would not be possible, so honestly, thank you from the bottom of my heart for all of your contributions. If you haven't yet, like and subscribe. The more likes we get and the quicker we get them, the bigger this channel will grow and the faster it will grow. I'd love nothing more than this channel to become something very special for you guys, but it's entirely up to you how fast that happens. Also, if you'd like more deck text, that's somewhere over there. And if you'd like to see what else the channel's been up to lately, that's somewhere up that way. Also, subscribe, circle below, do all the things.